How'd you like to join me in doing a great thing? That's right, 1,000 before Thanksgiving. I'm trying to sell 1,000 copies of my books before Thanksgiving and take the proceeds from each book sold and donate those to local charities that help families in need for the holiday season. Go to www.columbuscody.com to grab your book or books, or if you don't need a book, just make a donation. Help me help others. All right, welcome back to the Living the Life show. I'm your host, Columbus Cody, and I got a very special guest with me today. I've got an author, y'all. I got a brilliant author, one who sat down on the keys and made it happen. Thank you so much, Dan Smith, for joining us. This is S. Daniel Smith, in case you guys, we're going to talk about his book in a few minutes, but thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Cody, for having me. I guess we're doing fiction right off the bat with you calling me brilliant. I appreciate that, but that is definitely fictional. But it is good to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And, we're titling today's show, Focusing on the Father with Fiction. Okay, since you are a novelist, we're going to talk about your book in a moment. But before we jump into your book, I always like to get to know our guests a little bit more in depth. So I throw out some random questions and you throw the answers right back to me. How about that?
Sounds good, man.
All right. So tell me, being that we're talking about fiction, what's the best book you've ever read?
Oh, my gosh. You come right out, right out of the gate. Well, if I'm talking about Christian fiction, I think Frank Peretti's books, particularly This Present Darkness, was probably my favorite one. I like currently reading, I'm reading a lot of science fiction because of my other podcast, and I like the Expanse series. If any of your listeners are sci-fi folks, yeah, I mean, they are your friends too. Anyway, so Frank Peretti got me really into Christian fiction, and so I would say This Present Darkness was one of my favorites. Yeah.
So the title is This Present Darkness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now
it
Frank
was
Peretti's
written,
the one.
Long time ago, but it was good. Yeah.
He's the one that wrote The Oath, right?
He did. He wrote The Oath and several others. And if we talk long, I'll pull up some information that I need to talk about because I've read several of his books, but I can't recall all the plot lines offhand.
Man, that book, I just couldn't, I read it. Either I read or listened to it. I can't remember. I listened to a lot of books too, so I never can remember. Did I read that one or did I listen to that one?
Yeah.
And I was like, it was so it was so figurative. I couldn't tell what is the dragon. Then my wife read it, and my wife was like, "This book is awesome." But see, she reads a lot of fiction. I don't. I read a lot of nonfiction, and so I'm struggling to follow. What is the dragon? And she's like, the dragon is sin. I'm like, really? How? Explain it. And when she starts explaining stuff, I'm like, oh, that's deep. I like that. All right, so I'm going to have to check out some more of his books then.
Yeah, he's good. Good writer.
Yeah, I love to ask my guests about the books they like because then I get to learn some books I need to go and read.
Amen to that.
All right, so what's your favorite Bible character?
I heard you ask another guest this of yours, and I think I'm agreeing with one of your guests at least. Peter is my favorite. And the reason Peter is my favorite, I don't know if that's your follow-up or not, but I'll just tell you anyway. Peter made some very, very crucial mistakes early on. And now one of them was called out by Jesus before it even happened. So you could make if you're a Calvinist, you'd make the argument of whether he had a choice or not. But the important thing is that he was, impetuous. He acted without thinking. And that was me, particularly in my younger years, but also even now I still do that. I make some boneheaded calls. And then to see later in the Bible when he's writing his letters, he's a little older, and even through Acts, where he's making decisions for the entire church at that time. I mean, I'm not there obviously, but I aspire to be there, and so it shows me that truly God can use anyone. The old statement, God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies those He calls. I think He did that with Peter for sure. And so he is my favorite Bible character.
Yeah, and my dad's favorite character was Peter. No, matter of fact, maybe he didn't say his favorite, but the one he related to the most.
Yeah.
And I said, why is that? He said, because he liked to fuss and cuss, fight and cuss. That's what he said, making a joke. And he
Yeah.
said, because my dad's a retired pastor, and so I get a chance to learn a lot from him as it relates to, and I got some fun stuff I'm gonna be doing with him coming down the road in a couple podcast episodes. So maybe you'll get a chance to catch those.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Now, we're both Navy guys. All right.
Yep.
I'm rocking my USS
I see
Ticonderoga
that.
for
That's
today.
gorgeous.
Yes, yes. So first off, happy Veterans Day to you,
Happy
sir.
Veterans Day to you.
So tell me, based on all the ports, because you actually retired, right?
I'm actually still active, but I'm eligible to retire. I just haven't done it yet.
So you're what we call the lifer, dog. You
I
put
am the
in
lifer.
some time.
Yep.
All right. So what is the best port or the best place your service has ever taken you?
Wow. So I have a handful, and that's the best I can do. I love Japan, just about any port in Japan, but in particular, I liked Sapporo and Kagoshima. I was stationed in Yokosuka at one time, and so really all of Japan has been wonderful. I really enjoyed Singapore and Hong Kong. Those are just gorgeous cities with so much to do. Well, I mean, everyone's hit by COVID right now, but they are beautiful cities. And recently, I got a chance to go to some cities in Taiwan, if you can believe that. And I really enjoyed Suao, Taipei, and Kaohsiung in Taiwan. So the truth is, I could list off a bunch of others that also were great. Greece was wonderful. Crete, the island of Crete. But if I'm answering your question about like really where is the Navy taking me, that just drops my jaw every time, it'd be a port in Japan or Taiwan, probably.
Now you say you're a warrant officer, correct?
I am, yeah.
What made you decide to switch over from enlisted to officer?
I had several reasons in the end. I looked at what was I going to do as a chief petty officer career wise? What was my career progression? And I had some mentors helping me with this concept and the understanding of it. I looked at what was I going to do as a chief, and hopefully someday a senior chief, and maybe even a master chief. And then I looked at, the pay scales, to be honest, and what a warrant officer was going to do. And the jobs weren't drastically different. And so after talking with some mentors and, of course, talking with my wife, we decided to apply. And there were some other reasons there, not necessarily important in the grand scheme, but it really came down to what am I doing in the listed field versus what would I be doing if I went to the officer field. And they were close, and since they were close and the money was better, and the long-term prospects of having a career that could go all the way to 30 years, I just went warrant officer at that point.
Makes sense. All right, so let's talk Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's right around the corner. All right, what's your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
This actually on the list right downstairs from this room that I'm in right now, recording this podcast. I have already reserved it. Sweet potato casserole. Now I don't do it with marshmallows on top. I do it with the pecans and some brown sugar, and my wife makes a really good version of it. So I go with sweet potato casserole. Now I want some pie on the back end of that. So on top of the sweets I'm already eating, I'm going to have a pie later as well.
Sweets with a side of sweets.
That's right. Yeah. So once I'm comatose, I just eat the pie anyway.
My philosophy is on Thanksgiving, everything goes out the window. You can cheat galore on Thanksgiving.
That's right.
All right. So you told me your favorite character. Now bless me with your favorite book of the Bible.
That's a really good one too. And that's going to be probably even harder to answer, actually.
A lot of people struggle with this one.
Yeah, I did a lot of studying in the Psalms when I was working on my Master of Arts. And so I did some preaching out of the Psalms then from studying in my seminary. So Psalms is important to me. Some of the prophets, sections out of the prophets. My favorite verse in the Bible comes out of Isaiah, and And so I would say sections of several Old Testament books, and then in the New Testament, I think Acts is probably my favorite because it just, I mean, you
Such
had a bunch of
rich
people
history,
running
huh?
around in the Wild West as far as religion's concerned, and they were just
Yeah.
trying to make it work. And I
Mm.
appreciate that they were just trying to make it work, trying to follow God, and I understand and can appreciate that.
Yeah. Now you can't leave me hanging. Now you say Isaiah's your favorite verses in Isaiah. You got to bless me with that. What's
Yeah.
your favorite
Oh,
verse?
yeah. So, being a really good sinner, and I am super good at sinning, and I kind of mean that tongue in cheek, but the truth is, I have a 42 years of experience,
Mm,
and so I'm going to it because I don't want to mess it up. I
I
think
got
I
you.
could say it, but since we're on a podcast, I'm going to mess it up just for
We
so
might as well get it
might
right.
as well get it right. So Isaiah 1, excuse me, verse 18,
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah 1:18. Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they
Mm,
are red like crimson, they shall become like wool.
mm,
And I, this isn't the topic of the podcast, of course, but in some particularly dark times in my life, caused by me
mm-hmm.
and my pride and even arrogance and sin that came from that. When I came back to God and needed to know if God was going to uh, accept me, I mean, I believe in eternal security and whatnot, but to accept me as His friend again, that verse came to mind, and that has been a verse that I've hung on to many times since then.
Mm. All those sins washed away.
Washed away.
And the only one that's going to bring it back up is Satan and us.
That's right.
All
Yep.
right. So, last question, getting to
Okay.
know the great Dan.
Still on the fiction. Good deal.
Are you a pantser or a plotter when it comes to
Oh,
writing?
good question. And I am a pantser. I want to become more of a plotter. And, I don't know how much you want to go into it, but as I have learned the hard lessons of editing, I have come to realize that if I would just jot down some ideas before I started,
Mm,
I probably wouldn't have all the pain. So,
yeah.
so I'm a pantser. I sit down, I just start writing. Um, I'm trying to become more of a plotter.
Yeah. All right. So I'm more of a pantser myself, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. I don't think I take that back. I won't say I've plotted anything, but like you said, I have this big of an outline, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know who I want to talk about this chapter. That's it.
Right.
And then I just sit down and I go with it. And I'm gonna be honest with you. When I wrote my first book, I wrote a book called Recap, and I
Hmm.
wrote it for people who say the Bible is boring or the Bible's hard to understand. So it's a recap of several concepts or several principles you'll find within the Bible. But it's written with the idea of once you read this book and you realize how rich the Bible is, you're going to want to spend a lot of time in your Bible. That's the hope of Recap. So I'm sitting down, and the weird part was when I wrote Recap, I don't, like I said, I don't read a lot. I definitely don't read fiction, right? I rarely ever read fiction. And so I'm teaching a Bible study lesson that was covering what the book became about. And I'm driving to work one day and I feel the Spirit tell me, you need to turn that lesson into a book. And I dismiss it because I assume it's just some crazy thought in my head because one, I don't read enough. Two, I've never written anything. So a couple of days go by and I hear the voice within me again, and it's loud and it's adamant. You need to turn that into a book to help many other people. And I said, Lord, if that's you, I will obey you, but you're going to have to help me because I don't know anything about writing a book. So I started my research. I started learning how to get an ISBN number. I learned all these different things that I got to do. And I start typing and then I write for 2 weeks and I don't write for a month and I write for 2 weeks and I don't write for a month. And God would wake me up some days at like 2, 3 in the morning and I couldn't sleep. So I said, I'm going to go downstairs and write on the book. So when I go downstairs and write on the book, I'm half asleep and I'm typing. And I said, man, I bet tomorrow, whatever I'm typing is going to be just terrible. those were actually some of the best chapters of my book. Is when he woke me up and it was like, focus on me now and get this chapter written. And I was da, 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 da. So I'm definitely like you. I'm more of a pantser. I sit down,
Yeah.
seat of my pants, and make it happen.
Yep.
All right. Now we're gonna focus on you now. Done talking about me. Let's talk about you. Did you grow up writing all the time? Were you always writing growing up? Like as a little kid, your teacher said, "Oh my goodness, you have great writing. You're going to be a writer one day."
I did actually. Before I could even write, I was a writer.
Mm,
When I was, what would be preschool nowadays, where kids are learning their alphabet and how to write it and whatnot, pre-K and all that. I grew up in a rural community, and we didn't. I mean, there was a preschool in town, but I couldn't go to it. So I wanted to write so bad that I would bring a book, usually the like encyclopedia, to my mom or whatever, and make her copy parts of it out. And then
mm.
I would, we, take it to grandma's business and make a couple. They owned the business, so I wasn't cheating anybody. They'd make a couple copies of it, write some notes, and this was my book, and it didn't go anywhere uh, except to the family, And of course, they realized that I was just, copying down parts of other stuff. But that was my first foray, and I am so grateful. My mom's passed several years ago now, but she saw whatever it was. She saw it before any teacher saw it,
Mm.
that this was what I was gonna do. And so, yeah, even before I could write, I was writing. And then all through school, I had different teachers. In third grade, I was able to write by then, and my stories were still basically copies of others. Like I had read White Fang recently and Call of the Wild as a kid, and so
Mhm.
basically my stories were that. But I wrote, and my teacher let me read it out loud in class. And it happened again in high school. Again, we grew up in a rural community, and there weren't a lot of computers around in the early to mid '90s. And my teacher would let me check one out and take it home so I could write all my stories. And so,
Mm.
um, Mrs. Bird in third grade, Mrs. Johnson in high school, all of them, I would say, saw that. Whether they saw talent or not, I don't actually know. Neither of them have told me, by the way. So it probably means that they just thought it was cute that the little boy wanted to write. Um, but they fostered it, and so I am grateful for it, and grateful for teachers who just see that in
Yeah.
kids and help them get there. You know what I mean?
Shout out to those wonderful teachers,
That's right.
Yeah, and being that I am a teacher, I teach physical education. I've been teaching for about 20 years now. It's so great to hear someone give a teacher a shout out. And because I guarantee you those teachers probably didn't realize the impact that they were having at that moment. They were just trying to help you out. And come
Yeah,
to
and I
find
mean,
out,
like, yeah. What grade level do you work with?
I teach fifth through eighth grade.
So, I mean, you see a kid who's got a little talent, and you foster that talent,
Right.
right? I mean, it's the same thing for
Absolutely.
them. And
Absolutely.
so I value it. My son wants to be a teacher. I'm great. He's in college now, and uh,
Tell him to
I
prepare to lose all his hair.
yeah, he's going to be a math teacher, so I'm sure he will, or
Oh
it'll
my
all be gray
goodness.
soon.
Yeah.
But
See,
yeah,
I lost
I
two more strands just thinking about math. See
yeah, I get that too. He does it, not me. So.
All right. So tell me, what made you decide to write Christian fiction instead of secular fiction? Because think about it, secular is probably going to sell easier, right? What?
I think so, and I'll be honest. While I've never my actually, I better be honest. My first fiction publication was actually secular. It's out of
Okay.
print. It's been out of print for years. It was a military war book,
Hmm.
and it was not very good. But the publisher took a risk on me, and they're not in business anymore. Maybe it's my fault. I don't know. But
Yeah. We won't say
you
it's
know,
your fault.
yeah, that's right. But yeah, so that out of the way. And I don't know that I'm forever not going to write secular, because I think there's some value in Christians who
Hmm.
try and not cross over for fame. I hope that no one would do that, but cross over to present the message in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just the message of hope
Hmm.
and kindness and whatnot.
Right.
But But anyway, the coming back to it, and this goes for nonfiction writing too, because I've been published in some periodicals that are predominantly Christian. The reason for doing that instead of going into the secular market was I really think it was kind of a Holy Spirit decision, and I just kind of followed along with it. I don't think there was ever a decision specifically that said, put the chips in the table. Not that a gambling analogy is a very good one, but anyway, the point is that I'm all in. I don't think there was ever really a point that it was that. It was just a simple understanding that I'm going to do this. I'm, use my talent. I'm using air quotes here. Use my talent for the gospel message and to try and help out where I can. That was, in 2000. Actually, I started trying to write for publication in 96. And in 2000, my first article was published in a Pentecostal magazine, of all places, I guess, since I'm Baptist. But it was my first foray into traditionally published work. And I don't think there was ever a decision making that would have said, "Oh, you should try and make this a secular thing to get more money." It was just always going to be spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I know
So
you'd like a more concrete answer
no.
because I wish
I
I
mean,
had a more concrete answer.
I mean,
but I don't have it.
it to me, I totally get that. I totally get that. It's not that you were pinpointing. You're not pigeonholing yourself and putting yourself in a box, but at the same time, at the time that you were writing this is where God was leading, and I think it's beautifully stated. Like you said, it's not about fame. If the moment we do what we do for fame, we've lost the purpose of it, right? Because your desire is to because it's fiction, obviously you want to entertain, but at the same time sprinkle a little bit of goodness in there that may lead a person closer to Christ. And to me, I honestly think that it's like my pastor says, God doesn't tell you how to do every single thing. If you want to be a doctor, he doesn't mind you choosing to be a doctor. He's not going to say, "Hey, I want you to be a lawyer." You chose to be a lawyer, just be a godly lawyer. You chose to be a doctor, be a godly doctor, because I can use people in all of these realms. So if you're writing fiction and it's not considered Christian fiction, but yet there's principles within your book that is going to uplift and lead people toward godly principles, it's just not considered a Christian book. I was going to write a book years ago, a novel called The Ticonderoga Boys, right? But I couldn't figure out a way to write dialogue without using profanity. And there's no way a sailor, like, it would be unrealistic to write dialogue.
It would be horribly unrealistic.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I just can't write it. And, I've left it alone. And I've had people tell me, well, you can still write it. Just do you use the funny symbols? I say, man, you don't realize how many times you got to read those funny symbols. I'm like, nah.
It is true. He's not lying, y'all.
I'm just done with it. I'm done. All right. So what's the hardest thing? Because you've written nonfiction and a novel. What's the hardest thing about writing a novel?
The hardest thing about writing a novel, particularly as a pantser like me, is heading down a path and then finding out that the direction I was headed and that the characters were kind of taking me and that the plot was laying out is not the direction that I really want to go in the end. And so, and a lot of that's through, editing after the fact. But like with the nonfiction article, like I've written, for example, an article I wrote about multi-site churches. I wrote that a couple years ago for the EFCA Today, which is a denominational magazine. I laid out exactly what I was going to write for the editor. I told the editor who I was going to interview, the questions that I was going to ask during the interview. And then, of course, and then the editor okayed it. In fiction, there were some really painful cutting sessions because, in fact, the entire ending of my novella, Saving Ebenezer, had to change because I realized in the editing process, and my wife helped me a great deal with this, I realized that this was the ending that was wrong. And it was just as gospel as the ending that's there now, but it was the wrong ending for the characters. And
Gotcha.
so the biggest struggle for writing fiction, I think, especially for a pantser like me, is finding out later that you've got to do a lot of rewriting because your characters didn't
Mm.
do what they were supposed to do the first time.
Curse those characters.
Yep, that's right.
Now, let me ask you this. Being that your wife kind of looked it over and schooled you, did you struggle taking her criticism at all?
Uh, yeah, not to make this a marriage counseling session, but early in our marriage, we've been married 20 years. I don't know when this is going to air, but on the 18th, we'll be married 20 years, 18th of November. So
What's
next week,
today?
it's the 11th. So
Okay.
7 days from now, the 18th is our 20-year mark. And I'm grateful for those 20 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of forgiveness on her part in that during that time frame. But early in our marriage, I was so excited about being a writer, and I had been published the same year we got married, just before we got married. And so I thought, hey, she's going to be on board. She's going to think I'm the greatest thing since, I don't know, John Grisham. I don't know, just name a random famous author. I thought, I wrote my wife's stories. I thought this was great.
Mm.
And she offered to read some of my stuff, and then like she didn't say anything about it early on, and I was like, oh, why isn't she saying that I'm the best thing since sliced
Right.
bread? I don't get it. And then I asked her to actually edit something early, probably the first 5 or 6 years of our marriage, and she tore it apart.
The dreaded red pen.
The red just bled it all over the place. And she was doing that to help me, but my pride was not in a place to accept that.
Yeah.
And that caused probably several years worth, not that alone, but the fact that my pride was in the way caused several years of conflict in our marriage that if I had just stayed humble, it wouldn't have been there. And so when I wrote Saving Ebenezer, the novella, I actually went to her early last year in 2019. I had a finished draft, and I said, I'm coming to you humbly, I promise, but I need your help. And to her credit, she humbled herself as well and gave me some very good feedback. She's actually quite a gifted editor in her own right.
Yeah.
Even though she's not trained necessarily, but I approached this humbly. She approached it humbly. There was still a lot of red ink to deal with, but I was in a better place to deal with it. And so, that's the full spectrum. Early in our marriage, it caused a lot of issues, and it was, I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready because I thought I was already there, and I was not there.
Yeah. It's funny because the reason I asked you that is because when I wrote my first book, I had my wife read a chapter or so, and my wife doesn't say she doesn't like something nicely. I don't like it. Like, okay, now that hurts, right? I need you to be like, sweetie, it's really, really good, except if you would just, and so when she didn't do that, it made me not want to ask her anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So but then she's a person that reads 3 books a week. Who better to ask, is this flowing, than my wife? But because, like you said, my pride was in the way. I don't want you to tell me it's not good enough. And so I had to overcome that because I do want your insight, because you have an eye, and, especially women have an eye that we don't have that really makes things pop a lot of times. It's like, man, I didn't think of it from that standpoint. So shout out to your wife for hanging in there with you.
Yep. Alicia did a great job.
We got the name now. Shout out to Alicia. All right. So you were just telling us about your book, Saving Ebenezer. Tell us a little bit about what gave you the idea to write this.
So Saving Ebenezer is based on A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. In fact, it picks up 7 years after that book ends, in 1843. Well, 1843 is the year he wrote it. So that's the year in my fictional world, it picks up 7 years after that. So 1850. The reason the kind of reason behind that is I would read A Christmas Carol, or more likely I would see a movie or a play about it. And And then I would see Christians trying to incorporate it into the gospel presentation.
Mm,
And I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that it can't be done straight from the original work.
gotcha.
And so that was like for several years now. I was just thinking in my heart, and I think God was working with me at that time. Um, like, what happens next? Like, he's going to give away everything. Great. We should be all about that. We should be giving more than we are giving now. Pretty much everyone could probably say that. But where's his hope coming from?
Mm,
Is that where his Scrooge, this fictional character, is that where his hope is coming from? He hopes for redemption because he's going to give away his worldly, possessions.
mm-hmm.
And that just didn't seem like what the actual gospel message is. And so I just tried to think what what happens after he's done that. So he's destitute. He's tried his hardest to save Tiny Tim and become a kind of father figure for the family, kind of an uncle figure, maybe we would say. And is that it? Is that all we get? And
Mm.
so that's kind of where it all came from. Was I just didn't it didn't sit well with me that we could see a true gospel message from that.
Mm. Now, which character was your favorite to write?
That's an amazing question too. I like Scrooge a lot. They in the place of the ghosts of Christmas, Christmas past, Christmas present, and the Christmas yet to come, which is the original. I because I didn't want to make it a ghost thing, but I did want to honor the original work.
Mm-hmm.
I brought in an angel into the mix, what we would say is an angel from the Bible. Um, and I enjoyed writing his character a great deal. His name's Henry. He's in the book pretty early on, so I don't think there's any spoilers in saying that. And I enjoyed writing his character because he was the one character that got to be mine, really,
Mm.
because the others were Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
They have 7 years later, so some of them had done some growing by then. But because I wanted to stay true to the original, they were true to the original, or as
Mm-hmm.
close as I could be. But Henry was my favorite in that sense because he was mine, and I got
Mm-hmm.
to write him. But I really enjoyed going in and learning more about Scrooge and writing his character and his what happened next, type of thing.
So, do you find that? Well, I know the characters in this book are already based on characters that existed, but when you write other fiction pieces, do you find that most of the characters that you write are based on somebody you know, or is it just straight up fiction?
Uh, it's funny because we put at the beginning of every book the characters in this book are purely fictional and have no resemblance to anyone in real life, and that's theoretically true. In some of the other fiction I've written, they are not actual people.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd be lying if I said that people I know don't find their way into, their styles don't find their way into my writing,
Hmm.
or that their personas don't find their way into my writing.
Yeah.
I think there's just no way that wouldn't be true.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yes.
I think it's kind of cool. I mean, because you think about it, there's a movie years ago. I think it's called The Brothers, and he wrote a book, and they're all reading his book, and they're like, "Hey, that sounds like me in this book. Are you writing about me?" So just wondering if, as people are reading your book, like, hold on now, that sounds like his Uncle Jimmy. That he's, and Uncle Jimmy come knocking on your door saying, "You didn't paint me right in this picture right
Right.
here."
That's I think there's been books or movies even about that. I think Tyler Perry did a movie about it once upon a time,
Mm,
but some other folks have done it too, where it's like suddenly, and some people write with pen names to try and get around that because they do want to tell the dirt. I haven't done
ah,
anything like that.
yeah. I was thinking about writing a romance novel and using a different name so people don't
Might as well,
laugh at me
yeah.
for writing romance. Because my wife reads a lot of romance novels, not the
Yeah.
gushy, messy kind. She likes historical stuff. Like she likes to
Yeah.
learn about how they dressed in the 1800s and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And it's like, okay,
Well, I
like
think
I
there's a
told her,
huge market for it, so you'd
it
probably be
is
able to get
huge.
in there. Yeah,
It
it's
is
big.
huge. We just merged our Prime. And so now I looked on my Prime thing and I see all these books. I'm like, I didn't order these. And she said, oh, those are the books I had ordered. And I'm like, I'm looking, scrolling through, like, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books she has purchased or whatever. And it's like all this romance stuff. Like, I'm like, how am I supposed to stack up against these guys?
Well, right. I do wonder sometimes how Christian romance is written. And I'm not saying your wife has to read the Christian romance, but uh, I do wonder how people like how women predominantly read these and like I'm kind of glad my wife doesn't read a lot of them because I do wonder, like, she looks across the couch at me and like frowns. I mean,
You're not doing what Cedric did. Right.
right. And I definitely don't look chiseled like some of these
Right.
dudes.
Baby, that's fiction. This is
Yeah,
real.
this is real.
Yeah,
Yeah,
these
you get
I
what
know
you
he
get.
got abs and I got an ab. A
Yes,
large
yeah,
ab. And be
yeah.
grateful. Be grateful. All right. So we talked about your book and how the characters, a lot of them resemble the same characters as Dickens, but then you've got a little twist to it that's going to bring it around to where now we get a chance to see what happens when the part of the story that no one told us about. Now we get to learn a little bit more about that from your view, from your perspective. What was because you mentioned you had to chop some stuff up at the end. And I heard authors saying this, people that teach you how to write, and they say stuff like, you have to be prepared to kill your babies. That's what they call it. And I guess because it's like, no, not that. I want to keep that scene. But as you said, your wife was like, this needs to change and change that. And you're like, you sure? Can I keep that scene? It's not going to flow unless you cut that out. What was probably the hardest thing to let go from your manuscript?
It was the ending, and I tell you what, for anyone who's going to read the book, any of your listeners that are going to read it, I'm going to put on my blog the ending. I was encouraged to do this by somebody else, another
Mm,
podcaster. Um, the ending, like, I cried at my own ending, the original, like when I wrote it. I had really become one, a really, not one, but like a really, I had become friends
connected,
with some
huh?
of these,
Yeah.
characters, and so the ending was very emotional for me to write. And so, the last 10, 15 pages of the manuscript, when she read it, she just said, I'm sorry, but this has to go. And you need to rewrite it. You need to do an ending that does X, Y, Z. And I don't want to give it away. Um, People will see it when they read it.
Mhm.
They'll realize what's going on. But that was hard. And I actually, I said, okay, I promised I'd be humble here, but I need some time to think about what you just said. And so she agreed to let me have that time. And I took a couple of days to pray about it,
Mhm.
to do some thinking about it, to kind of, and I did a little outlining. I was like, okay, what would another ending look like? And then I read Stephen King's book on writing, and where he talks about killing your babies.
Yeah.
And to hear or to read in his book where, the end result of doing it, of letting those words go, means that you have a chance to have a better story. I had to let that go,
Mm.
and so it was hard. I had to do a lot of thinking about it. Um, but it was the right move. There's no way this book isn't better now that I let that happen.
Yeah. Now, did she kind of say, think about this? This might flow better at the end, or did she just leave it all up to you? Just chop the end, do something different, or have you thought about this for the end?
No, she did not try and, in fact, that was very specific. She said, I'm not going to tell you what to do instead.
Mm.
I'm just telling you you can't do this. And so um that's kind of where we were at. And then when I brought her a draft of the fix, if you will. And then we started tailoring that fix a little bit, but she left it open-ended. She said, actually, she kind of played with my pride a little bit. She's like, you're a better author than this. You can do better than
She
this.
gave
This
you
is
that
not
old
what you need.
motivation, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
All right.
and she did what a good woman would do for a man. She led me the way I should go.
Yeah. All right. So you cried at the ending, then you changed the ending. Did you cry at the new ending?
I did, probably. I don't think, actually, let me take that back. I didn't cry at the new ending. Probably because I was a little more mature, even by the time I had started writing that novella to the end of, when I wrote the rest of it, because my pride had become unattached to it. And so I wasn't as invested. What that meant, though, is that it was a more clearly written section. And so I didn't cry. I was actually probably closer to clapping when it got there, because it's happier. There's a happier ending. There's a more, I would say, fulfilling or satisfying ending now, and a joyful ending. One that mirrors more what we, if we read the whole Bible, right? And I assume several of your listeners have. And if you put all the Bible together, Revelation's a little hard to read sometimes, but the important thing is that the ending is good.
Right.
Like the ending is the way we want it
For
to
some
end.
of us.
Like, the old, for some of us.
Right.
But that's kind of what I focused on for the novella. What would be a happier, more fulfilling ending, and that's where we got. So cry? No, probably not. But satisfied.
Yeah, it was one of those.
Yes, that's actually exactly what I felt.
Okay, all right. So now I gotta get some advice from you now. Okay, here I am. I want to write a novel, and I just need some advice. What advice would you give me, a person that's never written a novel? What should I do?
Learn how to write first. Some of the mistakes I made early on in writing was I assumed that I would say God-given talent was going to just automatically carry me through, but I needed that to be refined quite a bit, actually. And not to give a shout out to too many people in this thing, but I don't know if you've heard of the author and podcaster Thomas Umstattd Jr. or the author James L. Rubart, but they had put together a course. James L. Rubart is a award-winning, best-selling Christian author, and is good books too. I should have mentioned him earlier on too. But at any rate, they put a course together that really focused on writing short stories at first, kind of starting over. Like, can you put in 4 to 10,000 words an entire plot? And can you make it tight? And can you not waste words? So that when you're doing 60, 70, 80, 100,000 words, are you also not wasting words? Do your plot lines not get lost? So learning how to do that, which I kind of always assumed I knew, but I didn't, really helped me. And so, you don't have to take their course specifically, although I think it's a great course. But get a hold of some books, practice, get some friends together who are going to tell you the truth, and just start small with some things that you can manage. I wish I had done more of that earlier on in my life, not just in my writing, but in all things. But specifically writing. Starting small, learning to handle a plot and characters before I go big helped me a great deal.
Cool. All right. So start small and learn the craft of it. And
That's
like
exactly
you said,
right.
I think, because again, like I said, I've never written anything fiction, right? But I started my first novel, I don't even know when. It's probably been a year ago. I wrote one chapter, right? I was so fired up, wrote one chapter, haven't touched it since. And one of the English teachers at my school, she's a traditionally published author now. She just finished releasing her first book, and she had a little group of authors, and we would share our pieces, and everybody would read it and give feedback.
Yeah.
And so my first chapter, they all read it, they all liked it. And there was one gentleman there, because what reminded me of this is when you said you cried at the end. And the beginning of my book, he said he couldn't read it because he had just lost his father. And the first chapter took him right back to that. And I took that as a compliment, in that it was so vivid for him that it drew him right back to losing his father. Because in the first chapter, the character loses their father, right? And so I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and start writing this book again. But by the time I finished teaching school and then taking care of my sons, now I can sit down and write, but now I'm exhausted. And I feel like I don't have the motivation for the fiction. And then to hopefully to make sure it, like you said, the dialogue is smooth and it's realistic, and just trying to figure out a way to bring that all together. I'm just hoping that one day that fire will shoot back in me and I can sit down and start making it happen.
Well, let me give another piece of advice then, specifically for you and for anyone in the same boat, because I've been there. I can't tell you how many chapter ones I've written and never done anything else with, or even half of a book. Several of those actually that are in the proverbial desk drawer. Perfection, the hope of perfection will keep you from doing anything. I mean,
Right.
That's the same in anything in life, right? But your first draft can be total dirt. And it's, I heard an author, and I can't remember who, once said, every first draft is perfect because all it's intended to do is get words on paper and get some ideas down. And so, Saving Ebenezer, my novella, went through, I don't actually remember how many drafts, but clearly several of them, as I changed the entire ending. I'm sure your teacher friend, who's been traditionally published, even went through drafts after she had turned it into her editor.
Yeah.
Because that is part of the process. And so I would say, don't worry about it being smooth, flowing smoothly. Don't worry about it being snappy. Don't worry about it making even a lot of sense right now, especially if you consider yourself a pantser. All it's got to do is get the ideas on paper. And so anyone who's struggling with that, that's what follow-on drafts are for. If I've learned anything through this process, follow-on drafts are your friend.
So in your writing of your book, what do you think is the biggest lesson God has shown you about yourself while writing this?
That if I can stay humble, I can accomplish things. And I know, even as that left my mouth, it sounded prideful. So maybe I better work on it a little bit. But
now, I didn't take it as prideful.
Okay,
I
good,
took it
because I didn't mean
as
it that way.
heartfelt submission. I took it as submission. I took it as, if you can remain humble, I'm going to do great things with you.
Yeah,
I can
and
use
that's
you
true.
to do great things if you don't let it go to your head and think it's about you.
Yeah,
and I received that. I received that for my own life.
Yeah, that's exactly what I learned. I think that was a turning point in my writing. I used to fight editors, particularly in my nonfiction. I thought when I turned a draft in, you better just accept it because it's as good as it's going to get.
Take it.
What in the world was I thinking? And so, if I could just stay humble, and that's a hard thing for me to do. That lesson is going to be learned over and over again, but that's the lesson. If I just stay humble, God will do things.
Yeah, and see, I've written 3 books. I self-published all 3 books.
Yeah.
For the sake of, I don't want no one to tell me it's not good enough. You know what I mean? And so I honestly believe when God gives me this fire back within me to get this novel written, this Christian fiction, it's going to be such a great book. But I think it would be much better served to publish it traditionally. But that means I have to be willing to let someone tell me it's not good enough.
It's
fix
not there.
this.
And
Fix this.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean, and I independently published Saving Ebenezer for several reasons, and we can talk about it if you want at some point. I want to be traditionally published as a novelist at some point. It's a desire for me too. That was not the reason you just mentioned is not the reason I didn't traditionally publish Saving Ebenezer, but I understand that because it's been in my heart many, many,
Mm-hmm.
many times. That's what I have to learn over and over again is that it doesn't mean that God didn't give me the vision. If someone else has to come, when my wife, told me I needed to change my ending, it didn't mean that God didn't give me a vision for the book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got in the way of the vision for the book, and my wife was helping me find what the true ending was supposed to be. And so,
Mm.
if I'm truly going to say that this is a faith-based deal, I have to believe that God told my wife, whether through just her natural thinking or audibly or in her spirit, that the true vision for that writing wasn't complete as I thought it was going to be complete. And so, um, hearing that people think certain things need to be changed, I mean, it can be as simple as a typo. Well, God didn't intend for a typo to be in there. You know what I
Right.
mean? And there
Right.
have been typos in my stuff all the time, and it has to
Mm-hmm.
get pulled out, or sentences that are run on, or phrases, or whatever the case is. It doesn't mean that God's vision for the story isn't complete or
Mm-hmm.
somehow I have failed. There's just a human process in there, and if I could just keep myself humble,
Yeah.
I might be able to get to what the vision was actually supposed to be. And so, I'm not trying to preach too much. I realize that it sounds like it now, but it's
I,
just a lesson I
I
have to
love
keep
it.
learning over and over again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a great lesson for us all. My philosophy is if you learn to humble yourself, you don't have to worry about God humbling you. That's
Yeah, absolutely.
but
Yeah,
I'm
because
gonna
it
tell you
hurts
something.
more when he does
Oh,
it.
it definitely hurts, but it's always beneficial as well. But I'm gonna tell you something. One of my fifth graders told me the other day, and then I'm gonna ask you your final question of the night. I was teaching them about goal setting. And I showed them this short video that I found on YouTube. And it was 7 things to help you accomplish your goals. And number 6 was accept criticism. So after I had them write these down and I said, okay, here's number 1 through 7. Which of these do you have the hardest time doing? And, I had 30 some kids in the room. I'd say at least a quarter of them put number 6, all right, accepting criticism. So I asked, why do you think that's such an important thing to do? And this is a fifth grader now. A fifth grader, he unmutes his mic and he says, well, coach, if you can accept criticism, you can fix a lot of the things that are wrong in your life. But don't view it as saying you're not good enough. View it as this is a tip for you. This is his words, right? And
That
I'm
is
like,
wise.
dude, that is deep for a fifth
Deep.
grade. That's deep for anybody. But
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm gonna adopt that thought process. Instead of me looking at it as going, you're saying I'm not good enough, I'm gonna take that as a tip of how I can do it better.
Yeah.
And this is a fifth grader. So he
Yeah.
blessed me that day out of
That's
the
right.
mouth of babes.
Yep.
All right. So I love to finish all of my podcasts with special guests with this final question. Being that the title of my show is the Living the Life Show, I love to honor one person in your life, the one person in your life that lived so upright before you that they showed you what Jesus looks like. Who would you say is that one person?
That's pretty easy. That was my grandma, Frances Smith. That was my paternal grandmother. Um, I remember first of all, she got me into church, and I mean, my dad would take me to church. My dad's a Christian. My mom was a Christian, but uh, grandma really helped us spur that,
Mm,
and grandpa to a degree for sure. But I saw a humble Christianity in my grandma, and I wish I had learned it more when she was still with me because
hmm
I would have asked better questions. Um, but Grandma Frances really let me see what a humble Christian looked like. Like her Bible, if you open her Bible, there are notes everywhere.
mm.
And sometimes I would try and I couldn't read her cursive, but like I would try, and sometimes I could even get the context. But But she didn't like spout out about how smart she was, or some of the concepts that she had heard that she had kind of helped develop, and at least for her own life. And uh, she didn't have to like be vocal and outrageous about what she was learning and everything. She just learned it, and she
Mm,
just communed with God, and she was just that simple but effective Christianity that now I'm mature enough to understand better,
mm.
and so I'm grateful for it.
I
So
like that.
grandma,
Simple yet effective.
yeah,
We don't have to impress anybody with deep words and big words and deep thoughts. Just live in a way that others will see Christ through us. Grandma, thank you
yep,
so much for being a great
yep.
example. Because of you, your grandson is striving to be the light as well. So, shout out to your grandma. And I'm praying that you and I will live up to her standards. We will continue to
I do too.
shine our lights and hopefully encourage others to be great men and women for God as well. Maybe one day someone will ask someone this question and their answer will be your name or my name.
Maybe.
That's the goal.
However, we could hope, right? That's
That,
legacy right there.
that is it. All right, everybody. I'm so grateful that you chose to hang out with us today. Want to say thank you again to S. Daniel Smith. Make sure you guys check out and go and find his book. Matter of fact, why don't you tell us real quick before we sign out where we can find your book?
It is on Amazon predominantly. You can order the paperback or the or Audible if you like listening to it in your car. All three versions, but they are exclusively right now through Amazon.
All right, Amazon. And tell us how to properly pronounce and spell the book. I don't want anyone to miss it.
Yeah, Saving Ebenezer. So it's saving like saving grace, and then Ebenezer, EBE, Ebenezer, Nezer, Ebenezer. So yeah, you just you search it on the Amazon and you'll find it.
You can Google it.
You could
I'm sure
Google
we're
it.
going to find it.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes,
Yeah, that's true
yes.
too.
So I'm going to, because I have it on Kindle, I'm
Hmm.
getting ready to start reading this bad boy. Matter of fact, I think this is what I'm going to do because I'm trying to finish this speed reading book. I'm trying to teach myself how to speed
Oh,
read.
I need to learn that too.
So as soon as I finish reading the speed reading book, which I'm going really slowly,
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to read your book right around the Christmas holiday.
Yeah.
Let that be my perfect Christmas book. And then can I do a review once I'm done?
Oh yes, most certainly.
Okay.
If you do reviews on Amazon, in fact, I would greatly appreciate it if you would.
I got you. I got you. And everybody else that's out there, if you decide to go out and grab this, which I recommend you do, make sure you leave a review because every review really does help, especially us authors that are trying to get other people to see what we have to offer them because we want to be a blessing to as many people as possible. So I do appreciate you. It has been my honor hanging out with you for this hour. And I'm praying that everyone that listens to the podcast, if they have a desire to write the advice that you've given, they'll take it, especially to remain humble.
Amen.
Humble. All right. So this is your one and only host that loves you. I almost said Coach Cody. I'm so used to saying Coach Cody Monday through Friday. But it's time for you guys to make sure you watch it, share it, and live it. Now let's get busy living the life.